point out as what you'll find on Canvas is that you'll notice that I will typically carry around an iPad and a nice little pen, and you'll see me draw stuff on it every so often because I can draw stuff just because that's fun. The main reason that I do that, though, is that I have the ability to record everything that I'm saying and writing on the board. Okay? Which means I will then record every single one of the lectures, assuming there isn't a software glitch, and I will post that video to YouTube that then links to Canvas. So you get access to all of the lecture videos, everything that happened in class, unless I forget, like I just did, and spent the first 15 minutes not being recorded. Okay? So if for some reason you miss, please check Canvas. If you want a second pass at the lecture, perhaps I went too fast through the material, pull it up and scan through it up there as well. Okay? I've gotten a lot of positive feedback about those videos being extremely helpful. There's a lot of information available up there. We'll talk about that a little more later. Okay? So now back to where we would expect to have started the class. Hi everybody, my name is Mike McFavlin. I go by Mike, which is why the McFavlin is in parentheses. Mike is just my preferred name. The whole McFavlin, I've never really gone by my last name ever. Professor, instructor, all that fun stuff. If you really want to use it, feel free to go ahead and use that. But all I really need to see is Mike, or here is Mike. Pretty much if I respond, that's a perfectly valid name to use. Okay? Let's see. Other kind of oddities. Perhaps you're nervous about organic chemistry and want to find someone that either knows their material or doesn't know it but doesn't test you very hard on it. For that second one, that's unfortunate. I do test very hard. But I think I know my material as well. And you might want to look online for some rating reviews or things along those lines. Pretty sure McFavlin isn't up there yet, or is it? I think it may have happened. I just changed my name within 2 years. So I've been teaching now for 6 years in the community college system, and then as a graduate student doing all sorts of classes at ASU as well. And if you look for McFavlin, you don't find a lot of information there. And that's because my name is different. Okay, so everybody seems to wonder why my name is different. Anybody heard rumors on what it was changed from?
Davis.
How do you spell Davis?
D-A-V-I-S.
A-V-I. How do you spell Allen?
H-A-L-E-N.
L-E-N. Now the real tricky question. What's my wife's name? McFeely. We took our 3 last names and averaged them all together and made McFavlin. Okay. Which is where that name has originally come from. So if you're ever curious on where that came from, it's because it came out of thin air and we just kind of made it up one night. So that's kind of, I guess you could say, a little bit of information revealing something about my characteristics as well. More than willing to change things around and flip things on their head just because I think it's funny. Like I said, I've been teaching at the community college for about 5 years. This is only my 2nd semester at Chandler Gilbert. Just got hired full-time, yippee. Last semester I was teaching 236, so the 2nd semester version of this, in Chem 130. 235 I would say is more in kind of my bread and butter section because I think it's fun. 235 you get to build up all the fundamentals, you get to understand everything that's happening with it, and then 236 you just do it again. And then you do it again. And you do it again. So 236 is, in my opinion, very, very boring. Unfortunately, it really isn't until 236 until most students actually have that click of, oh my God, this is stupidly easy. Why did it take me so long to figure this out? Okay? And that's ultimately because of the practice that's required to go in and learn organic chemistry. It's an entirely new entirely new language, requires lots and lots of practice to pick up those patterns. Once the patterns become visible, you can't see anything else and it just becomes easy. Okay? It does require work after that, but it just kind of falls into place and everything kind of makes sense. Okay? To get that practice, You can do it on your own, but the problem with doing work on your own is that you have no idea if you did it right or not. Okay, so there'll be a couple ways that we can get around that. Number one, I'll be holding lots and lots of office hours. What I've got listed up there, what do I have? I can't count, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours of availability. I think the minimum is supposed to be 5. What's not listed on there is the potential, which I think I put on my syllabus, is occasional Friday office hours. The reason why I only say occasional, we're just going to say OC, is because I'm new faculty. I have all these weird meetings that I have to attend to, as well as department meetings, and they tend to schedule all of those on Fridays, which makes it very difficult to hold office hours. So I try and weasel my way out of most of them and do office hours instead, but that just kind of depends on how good I am at weaseling. Okay? So if you need help, I'm more than available physically on this campus. I did an alarming total of hours that I spent on campus. At the end of last semester, I was physically on the campus at least 50 hours a week, which I thought was absolutely astonishing, because then there's also all the work I'm doing at home as well, which my wife can attest to. So if you can't get a hold of me on campus, you can always send me an email. Michael McFavlin, cgc.edu, works perfectly well. My response time tends to be fairly good. It used to be less than 4 hours I was responding. I do expect you to give me at least a 24-hour warning before you start getting angry at me for not responding fast. Okay? But I should be responding pretty swiftly. Okay? I guess one more little odd thing you could say about me, or some people are surprised about. In my lifetime, I have owned a car for all of 2 months. Okay, yes, with an M, 2 months. In San Diego, where I did my undergrad, that's where I had it for 2 months, and it collected parking tickets, not because I was a bad parker, but because I would never put the permit on the dashboard, and then I would never use the car. So they'd ticket me for not parking, or for not having a permit, and then I wouldn't see it for 2 weeks, so they kept ticketing me. So I finally got rid of it and said, okay, fine, I don't want to collect parking tickets anymore. Since then, I've used public transportation and biking, okay, cycling for pretty much everything. When I moved out to Arizona, I noticed the public transit system was not my friend, so I ended up biking it pretty much everywhere, and pretty much built my life around being within usually a 3 to 6 mile radius, and within that radius I could do pretty much anything I wanted. Okay? Things have changed slightly. I still don't own a car, but I can borrow/steal my wife's every so often. Okay? And the main reason that has to happen is that standard 3 to 6 mile radius is now turned into 16. So for me to get to campus, I have to bike 16 miles here and 16 miles home, which is a bit of a trek, and I'm definitely not in shape enough to be doing that 5 times a week. But I can pull it off 3 times pretty well. Okay? So to be here, I'm working my butt off to get here quite literally. I kind of expect the same from you guys as well. Okay? If not physically, hopefully mentally, maybe a little emotionally. But we'll see how it goes. Okay? The Canvas site, I do expect you to check fairly frequently. Like we said already, there's lots of information up there. The other thing that's going to be helpful is the discussion boards. If you've got questions, post your questions to the discussion board. Okay? If you don't see me responding, that's because Canvas is pretty awful and makes it difficult for me to be able to check that. So my response time is much slower on Canvas. Okay? But I will still check and post answers to your questions up there. If you want to send me an email, I can copy your email to Canvas and give the answer as a complete text there as well, so that everybody has access to both the questions that you're asking, because in a class this size, you're not the only one. Okay? Somebody else will have that question and want to know that answer as well. Okay? The other reason why I would encourage you to use the discussion board. Okay? In this class, okay, what are the odds that somebody else knows the answer beyond me? Organic chemistry is difficult, but it's not quite that difficult. There is a significant odd ratio to suggest that somebody else in this class can help you. All right? Take advantage of that. If you come in and only expect to get information from me, that's going to make your life a lot more difficult, and it's going to make the class a lot more strenuous. Make connections within the people in the classroom. Try and find everybody else. Figure out who knows what's going on, and try and maybe get them to try and teach you some information as well. Okay? So I really, really do encourage you to work together to figure out the material. It will help in the long run. Okay? So try and take advantage of those discussion boards. Questions? I know that was, gosh, 20 minutes to talk about one slide. There's only 30 more slides left. I don't think I was kidding. I think there are 30 more slides. Hopefully they'll go faster. General description. Organic is kind of the next step up from general chemistry. There's a couple approaches on how you want to look at it. To me, organic chemistry is vastly different from general chemistry. And if you take kind of a rough poll of people that have gone through both, the people that liked organic chemistry hated general chemistry. The people that loved general chemistry typically hate organic chemistry. It's an entirely different thought process and kind of brain wiring behind it. General chemistry is very math-oriented. There is an equation, you plug in the numbers, it spits out an answer, you're done. Organic chemistry is, there's this relationship that I have here that I can apply to 20 other different things. What you'll learn in the class is, this is the relationship. Let me apply it for you for 2 or 3 examples at most. You now have to apply it to the rest of them. Okay? That requires a lot of extra effort on your part. Okay? Well, that's ridiculously difficult. It's no more difficult than if you had to go through and learn a language. What do you do when you learn a language? You learn how to conjugate groups of verbs. If it's English, you learn how to conjugate one verb. But most other languages, you learn how to conjugate a verb that ends in, shoot, where's my language barrier? AR. And it conjugates the same way in all of those different types of verbs. You get the same types of conjugations. Organic chemistry is very similar to that thought process. We teach you, here's how it conjugates. You apply it to a new reaction or a new system. Okay? And when you learn a language, how many of you learn a language in a semester, become fluent in it? It doesn't really happen. Okay? You can't fully expect that to occur. Okay? Same thing's going to happen with organic chemistry. You need to go through and do that practice. You need to speak it. You need to write it. You need to do it. The more you can get involved with the language, the more you think about it every single day, as tedious and painful as that may be, the better off you'll be in the class. Okay? So it really does require that thinking process. The other thing that makes it really big or largely different from general chemistry is that in Gen Chem, it's here's first semester, here's second semester. And at least from my perspective, having to teach those, I don't really see a clear path through. I could take Gen Chem 1, and I could take it 1 year, and I could take Gen Chem 2 a second year. There's no continuity between the two classes. Yes, you get some basics behind it, but there isn't like a clear story through it. Organic chemistry is really cool for that. We tell a story at the beginning, and we use those same rules and ideas and thoughts all the way through. So it does propagate. It becomes a continuous year-long process, as opposed to this very discontinuous, choppy system. Okay? So our first semester, we got a lot of basics to go through. You kind of learn all the individual pieces, and then you start putting all those individual pieces together in different orders in second semester. Okay? And from my opinion, second semester, there's very little new material. Oh, there's all those reactions. All those reactions are the exact same thing you did in first semester. We just changed an atom from being a carbon to an oxygen, or a carbon to a hydrogen. Well, do you know what oxygen is in relationship to carbon? Yeah. Well, then did anything change? No. Okay. So it's about seeing those parallels. And yes, that may sound like Greek right now, but hopefully by the end of the semester, you'll start to see those parallels. Okay? And if you couldn't tell, practice is going to be really, really important. Okay? Course materials. They went through, and by they I mean the publisher went through and changed the edition of the textbook right at the beginning of the year, which made trying to get copies of the textbook a pain for the bookstore. We're going to be using primarily the Smith textbook on organic chemistry. There are a couple versions out there. Thank you, by the way. This is the version that I would expect you to have purchased. It's the green cover. There's another one out there that's kind of brown with, I think, clownfish on the front of it, which is the 4th edition. From what I can see from the table of contents, there is no difference between them, of course. That's just the way textbooks work. To buy that new 4th edition, it's $300, I think. The 3rd edition, if you go to the bookstore, is, I think, $200. Either way, it's still ridiculously expensive. This is the book that I purchased just a few days ago. Okay? My book versus your, and no offense to your book looks a lot nicer than mine. Mine looks a little beat up. This has all the information in it. There's nothing inherently wrong with it other than it doesn't look nice. My book cost $30. Okay. I think I got it from Chegg.
This was 23.
From Chegg.
Textbooks.com.
So I would recommend, highly recommend that you go online and try and find a source for your textbook other than going through the bookstore. Okay? Really, really recommend it. If you've got the money to dump, then feel free to go ahead and dump it at the bookstore. I'm sure they will be more than happy to accept your money.
How soon would you be absolutely required to have it in our
Good question, which kind of comes to the next statement. Do you have to have the Smith textbook? No-ish. So homework typically is based out of a textbook. So if I was assigning textbook questions for the homework, then yeah, you would need that textbook almost right away. What we're going to do instead is an online homework system. And the reason behind the online homework system is you get a faster response. So if something's wrong, you know as soon as you click submit. If we were doing textbook questions, you would submit your, because this is how, I don't like grading homework, you would submit a homework notebook to me the day of the exam. I look at it and say, yeah, you attempted it, here's your homework points. Okay? No feedback whatsoever. Okay? So if you weren't coming into office hours or you weren't going to a tutor, you have no idea what you're doing wrong necessarily. With the online homework system, you can get that information, you can get that feedback. Okay? So the textbook will help because I've based how I'm parsing out the lectures, how I'm dividing them up, based on largely what's in the textbook. And I'm going to have to add some extra things, particularly in Chapter 1. There's a selection or a section on molecular orbital theory that's not in your textbook at all, but I think is a really important topic to discuss. So we'll end up talking about that a little bit, even though it's not in your textbook. Okay? Which also means there won't be any homework questions. The online homework system does not have a license for the textbook. So what they've gone through and done is they've created a litany of questions and said, this matches the material covered in that chapter. So I went through, and if you take a look at the schedule, I'm going to steal from you this time. Take a look at the schedule. I've gone through and listed topics and chapters. The chapter sequence comes from the Smith 3rd edition textbook. All right, and I tried to get really nitpicky in with what sections I was doing and all of that. You can see at the beginning of the semester that seems to work pretty well, and then at the end of the semester, just kind of list the chapters. And that's because I didn't agree with how the chapters broke down, so I couldn't go through and say, well, I'm going to talk about section 10.1, 10.2, and 11.6, and 11.3 on this day, and then I'm going to talk about the next 3 or 4 sequences. It just didn't match nicely. Okay? So the intent is that the Sapling people have gone through and matched, according to my syllabus as best they can, those homework selections. Okay? So that you can get the best matchup with the textbook as possible. Okay? I've also included the topics in there. The topics are included primarily because if you aren't using the Smith textbook, you can use virtually any other textbook and find those same topics listed and mentioned within each of those. Okay? So I'm fine with any other textbook, and we won't have this whole homework issue that typically shows up if you use a different textbook. The one issue with getting other textbooks is there are multiple types of organic chemistry classes. There is the full year sequence, which you guys are now in the first semester of, and then there's also a fundamental organic chemistry class. That compresses the full year into one semester, which means they go through a lot less detail and they condense it into a single textbook. That textbook is usually about half the size of this one. Okay, I'm going to steal yours again because mine's too far away. Okay, so if you see a textbook that is smaller than this, it is probably not for the right course. Okay, you want an organic textbook that has some meat behind it. Okay, and you should be good with pretty much anything. Does that answer your question in way more detail than you ever wanted to know?
I really do know if mine comes in 8 days, will I still be okay? But
You'll
yeah,
be fine.
good.
Okay. The homework, there are directions on the syllabus. I am out of copies of the syllabus. I just think it's a waste of paper. If you go to Canvas, hey, there's Canvas again. The syllabus is on there. You can download it and follow the directions to sign up for Sapling homework. Okay, we'll talk about that in a little bit, particularly when it gets to that learning curve note. Lecture notes, I will do the best that I can to get the lecture slides tempted at least the night before. Okay? We're starting on Monday. In theory, I should have the lectures entirely prepared by the previous Friday, which I forgot about in all honesty, this last Friday, and so didn't get them finished till about Sunday night and got them posted up there. Okay? So the slides that are available are now for all of Chapter 1 and starting to push into Chapter 3 very, very barely. Okay? I still haven't come up with a nice way to label them so that you know exactly what matches. I have tried doing it by day. So you'll see a lecture that says wk01a. That would mean week 1, first lecture, A. Okay? If I go through and set it up that way, though, and post now week 1b, there's going to be a slide overlap. So if you've gone through and printed out all the slides, you get this massive slide overlap that you didn't actually want. Okay? So I'm going to try my best to figure out the easiest way to get that overlap avoided, and we'll see what comes up or what we end up seeing as far as posts. If you've got ideas on how to label lecture slides, I'm game to hear those options, preferably after class. Okay? Lecture videos. Every lecture is getting recorded, both audio and whatever I'm drawing on the slides, which isn't happening a lot right now. But everything will get recorded and posted to YouTube. Was it the handle? My name on YouTube is CGC Chem Mike, so you can just do a search for that and find it. You will find links in a single announcement. All of the lectures will get posted to that single announcement. You can just click those links and watch the videos there. Okay? Along those lines, next Monday, do we have class? No. So what are we going to do? Instead of losing that day, there's going to be an online lecture, which will match with the lab too, so it's not like you're watching 2 different lectures. And I will expect you to go in and watch that and do a little bit of homework as well. Okay? That way, you're still thinking about chemistry, and you're actually potentially learning a little bit at the same time. Okay? And then we don't lose those days. Questions about those course materials? So I think the rest of this goes now into details in each. Online homework, everybody complains about Sapling. Doesn't matter what homework system you get, everybody's going to complain about it. Okay? Sapling is by far superior as far as organic chemistry goes to any other online software out there. Okay? We've looked at a bunch of different versions. Sapling just has it set up. Their program is actually so good, they've sold the software outline to other people to then develop their own homework systems using Sapling's base building system. Okay? That does not mean it's not going to be a pain to deal with, and you will encounter cases where you think you have the answer, you show a tutor, they think you have the answer, you show me, I think you have the answer, and you're still wrong. Okay? And we still haven't figured out exactly why that happens. The best guess is double clicks, which means you're dropping 2 atoms on top of each other, which means you can't see those 2 atoms. So it looks like it's the right answer, but you've put an extra atom in there that Sapling says, no, you can't have that. Okay? So there are little subtleties like that that make it a pain. To avoid that issue, we'll scale the points accordingly. So if you score between 90 and 100%, that's 100% of the points as far as your homework grade. Okay? 80 to 90, 90% of the points. Okay? So you're getting an A by just getting 80% of the questions right. Okay? The average, as far as the homework grade that I'm shooting for, is somewhere about 80 to 90%, okay, as far as points. From last semester, it was 85%. Okay? The average score was an 85 points out of 100. Okay? So the homework is not there to penalize you. It's there to kind of reward you for doing that extra practice and getting that feedback. I've currently told Sapling to have assignments due with each lecture. I think I've got it set up as 5 questions per lecture. The intent is that you would do some of those problems before lecture, and then I will make it due the day after. Okay? So that if we talked about some extra information, now you can go through and answer the more advanced questions. Okay? The hope being that you'll actually be preparing both before the lecture and then immediately applying it afterwards. If you can do that, then you're actually making the lecture worthwhile. Okay? Anybody seen statistics? How long does it take before a lecture is completely out of your brain? Roughly 24 hours. If you don't review your lecture within 24 hours, you didn't attend lecture. Okay? That's kind of a pretty steep drop-off. Okay? So you really want to be reviewing the lecture as quickly as possible to try and reinforce and get that information stuck in your head. Okay? And so that's what we're going to try this time around. I'm not saying this, but I have no problem shifting deadlines if it turns into an issue. Okay? Or having Sapling restructure the homework assignment. So instead of having, 32 class periods, instead of having 32 homework assignments, you have 16, cutting it in half, okay, making it weekly assignments instead. We'll just kind of see how the semester goes, and ultimately how well I can stick to the schedule. Okay? Questions? Yeah?
I have questions regarding the resonance mechanism. What's that? Pushing electrons?
Oh, I forgot to include that on that. If you take a look at the syllabus, there is an extra thing on there. Let's see, where do I have space? I don't have space, so let's just make a new slide. There is a book that, when I was an undergrad, was a required purchase, and I ended up not purchasing it until several semesters later. It's called Pushing Electrons. It was a bit frustrating of a purchase to look at it. Actually, I purchased it when I bought all... Come on. Sometimes this happens. Oh, of course. I exit the drawing and draws it right as I do it. Book known as, there it goes, Pushing Electrons. And it's written by Weeks. It's a small little book, very, very tiny. It will help you when withdrawing structures, and then primarily it's more important when looking at resonance, which is a huge answer when it comes to organic chemistry. Anybody remember what resonance was from 151?
Correct structures.
Multiple correct structures kind of works. So we're looking at,
It's like the electron can be moving around.
it's looking at the electron position. So we want to get a little bit careful or a little bit more detail than just multiple correct structures, because as we'll find probably on Wednesday, our next class period, we can take the same formula and draw a whole bunch of different structures. Those different structures aren't resonance. Okay? What we're looking at when we're looking at different structures is we're talking about the same atom arrangement, but the electrons that are within those atom arrangements can change. Okay? Really difficult concept. It's usually glossed over in 151. Some instructors go into it in more detail than others. Probably the ones that go into it in more detail have talked to an organic chemist. The ones that don't talk about it have not had to teach organic chemistry. So what we're looking at with resonance, and we'll continue to go back to this, is if you're ever asked the question in organic chemistry, why? Why did that reaction react that way? Why did that structure do that? roughly 70% of the time, the answer is resonance. Okay? So kind of keep that in the back of your head when we start getting into reactions and looking at those resonance arrangements. Ultimately, what we're concerned about is the location of electrons. It's the name of this little text I'm recommending. Pushing electrons. How do you move electrons? What are the rules? And it provides you lots and lots of practice. I have a really cheap version because I lost my original version. That's like the second edition. I don't know how I was able to get a hold of the second edition, but I did. Already drawn in all that fun stuff, but it's helped a number of students that have had problems with the resonance and mechanisms, and they've used it to figure it out and go, okay, now it makes a little bit more sense. It just gives you a little bit more practice with dealing with structures. Okay, so it's highly recommended. I don't care what edition you use. It's not, I do have it under required, don't I? It's not required, it's highly recommended. Okay? If you're spending more than 20 bucks, you shouldn't be buying it. Let's put it that way. It should be really cheap. Okay. We've got a variety of assessments throughout the semester, quizzes, semester exams, and the final exam. Quizzes are going to be largely for me and a little bit for you as far as figuring out what you know or don't know. We'll look at 10 to 15 quizzes throughout the semester. I think 5 to 10 points apiece. I haven't really figured that one out yet. And it makes up, I think I said 50 points total on the syllabus. So if we end up having more quizzes than we have points, I'll just start dropping the lowest quiz scores. Okay? So again, it's not there to penalize you. It's there to kind of give us some feedback so I can adjust what I'm talking about and you guys can figure out what's missing. Okay? The semester exams. We'll have 3 of them with the intent being to prepare you for the final exam. And we always prepare for the final exam. The final exam is a little bit different in our case because we're dealing with the ACS first semester organic chemistry class or exam. How many of you have had an ACS test? Maybe the better question is how many of you did not have an ACS test? Okay. Those of you that did not have an ACS test, just a heads up. The average on your ACS tests, anybody know percentage-wise, those of you who have taken it? 50%. Okay. They are very difficult tests, but mainly difficult in length more than anything else. The questions themselves are actually not that difficult. Okay? It's just ridiculously long for the amount of time that you have to spend on it. Okay? And that's usually what throws people for a loop. So to prepare you for that, that's what my tests are going to be. Okay? So the semester tests that you're going to see as we go through this are going to be long in preparation for the ACS test. They will be composed of multiple choice, but only multiple choice because the ACS test is multiple choice. I really hate multiple choice when it comes to organic chemistry because what we're looking at is structures. Okay? You can look at a structure, but you may not understand it until you draw it. Okay? So if you come and ask for help, probably the number one thing you'll get from me is, did you draw it yet? And you say, well, no, I didn't need to. Well, you're getting help from me, you're going to draw it. And it may be something that's really silly for you to draw out. I've actually been surprised how many people start to draw something and go, oh, okay, I don't have that question anymore. Well, that's cool. Okay. Why don't you tell me your answer just in case, just make sure you're right. Okay. But that drawing ability really helps reinforce a lot of the fundamentals in organic chemistry. You can expect those short answers to show up as well. Okay. Every exam will be cumulative. And that's because your ACS exam will build on the whole semester. Okay? So we want to kind of continue to review and refresh that older material so that way you can do better as you move through it. Okay? Yes?
The semester exams, are we taking them in class or how long do you take them?
They will all be in class for the full time period. Okay? So it's the hour and 15, I think, is our time period, 75 minutes. And that is probably the most common complaint, is that the exams are ridiculously long. Oh well. Okay. Questions about your exams or the final exam? Yeah.
You said you're going to teaching here now 2 semesters?
This is the second semester here, yeah.
Do you have like information on your average test scores?
They're 60 to 65%. the average test score. So it's a little actually high. We're really going to push it towards the ACS exam. Yeah.
You said the ridiculously long. How many
It is 70 questions, which as far as length isn't bad, but you only have an hour to do it. You have an hour and 50 minutes to do it. It's roughly 2 minutes per question. Okay. Yeah, for 70 questions, which doesn't seem that bad until you sit down and try and crank it out. And it really does build on you. There were a couple other hands.
So then if the average is right around 65, do you weight those?
Yes, let's see, did I put something up on that? Oh, shoot. Looks like I've lost the connection. So when we're looking at, nope, that was too far. Oh, I didn't put grades up there. I thought I had a grade slide in here. Everybody's always concerned about where grades are. There is a section in the syllabus describing what I do for grades. And what I do is we say 90, 80, 70 are your kind of standard cutoffs. If you clear 90%, you are guaranteed an A. You clear 80, you're in the 80 to 90%, you are guaranteed a B. Okay? That does not mean if you get an 85 that you're getting a B. Okay, which is kind of weird. Or even an 89 that you're getting a B. Okay? I will go through and curve the class as I see fit. If we look at the ACS final being 50% is the average, okay, and we use our standard 90, 80, 70, 60 cutoffs, very few of you are going to get anything higher than a C, okay, at best. Okay? So I will normalize and adjust grades throughout the semester, and as we get exams back, I'll show you what happens, okay, and how I assign grades. In general, the cutoff drops anywhere from 2 to 5%, okay, all the way down. Okay, so if you get an 85%, usually that's an A. 75%, usually that's a B. Okay? There is some fluctuation with that, but because we're grading on a curve, it's very difficult to do any talking about it until we have data to look at to say, here's where the curve falls. Okay? And I'm very nitpicky about showing everybody this, so after every exam, we will probably spend a good 15 minutes talking about it so that you know where you're standing within the class. Okay? The next thing to go with grades, oh man, lose the connection again, is almost invariably someone's going to ask about extra credit. Okay? So let's just kind of preempt that right off the bat. Yes, there will be extra credit. Okay? But I think extra credit is a bit of a wishy-washy statement, okay, or in general. Most people will ask for extra credit when? End of the semester. It's pretty useless at that point. Okay? So it's usually coming up, oh, I'm failing the class. How can I pass the class? Give me extra credit. Okay? No. Extra credit is there to kind of help you and push you over borderline grades. So to go through and deal with that, I will offer extra credit. It's 2%, so it doesn't seem like a lot, but that is enough to jump you up a borderline grade. Okay? To get this 2%, I want you to prove to me that you deserve it. And that proof has to happen through the entire semester. Okay? And we're going to do that with something that I like to refer to as dialogues. Within 24 hours of the end of either Monday or Wednesday's lecture, you send me an acceptable email explaining what you learned and how long you spent studying the material, okay, since your last dialogue. Okay? This is going to do two big things. Number one, within 24 hours. We said after 24 hours of a lecture, it didn't matter what you're talking about, or it didn't matter what I lectured on. So there's the 24-hour time period. The hope is that within that 24 hours, you review that material. You've now looked at it and said, hey, I've learned something. I'm going to now tell somebody that I learned it. So you have to then not only have studied the material, but now you're proving that you studied it by sending me that record. But at the same time, you're now discussing it and talking about that material, which again reinforces it within your head. Okay? So kind of a neat process. The next big thing that I want in this is how long you studied that week. Okay? And I may end up changing that prompt around a little bit. how did you study? Okay, so if I get the first exam back and the average is a 40%, it's never happened, but let's just say, just for the hell of it. Okay, we get that 40%. That means to me that there was some massive disconnect somewhere. So one of the places that I'll look for that disconnect is in your study habits. So what I may ask is not how long did you spend studying, but what did you do to study? Okay? It's kind of shocking how many people think, oh, I can just read the book. Or I can come to class, he says it, and I understand it, I'm good, perfect. Okay? That's nice. One thing about listening to me talk is that what have I done probably at every single stage? There was the question, now what do I follow it with? I told you the answer. Okay? Organic chemistry is amazingly easy if you know the answer. Okay? On a test, you are not given the answer. Okay? When you go through and do the homework, you're not given the answer. Okay? This is one of the reasons why I don't like textbooks, because they give you the answer. Just flip through, I do the problem, look at the back of the book, oh, I was wrong. Oh, yeah, I know why I was wrong. You just looked at the answer. Of course you know why you were wrong. And you now have no idea how to fix what you did wrong. Okay? That thought process of looking back at how you're studying, why are we talking about the things that we are talking about, is an important process that allows you to get engaged in the material and allows you to do better in the class. Okay? So I want you to be thinking about the time that you're spending and how you're spending it. And maybe reading the textbook isn't all that helpful. Okay? Well, then don't read it. Okay? Find something else to do to make up for that time to get that practice in there. Okay? So I expect to see at least 12 of these throughout the semester, which means roughly one per week. Okay? For every week we have class. It's not that challenging. I'm not looking for something massively long here. It can usually be done in 2 to 3 sentences. I've had people that just naturally always want to summarize the chapter, so they do a full type-up, a summary of the chapter, and then they submit that to me, usually in a document. The fun thing about that document is I never read it. Dialogue is usually supposed to be 2 ways, so I'm supposed to read and respond. There's 33 of you. I'm going to be offering it for the biochemistry class as well. There's only 16 of them, so it's not that bad of numbers. But if everybody does this, I'm looking at 50 emails that I have to respond to every week. Okay? It's a lot of extra response time on my part. You won't see a response likely from me. Okay? The only time you'll get a response from me is that when I decide to go through and spot check and make sure people are actually doing it for real, as opposed to sending, haha, you're not reading this, thanks for my extra credit. No. I expect some thought process behind this. So I'll go back in and look, and if I see that response, I'll just cut you immediately out of it. Okay? And I want to make sure that you're thinking about it a little bit. Okay? So, well, I learned about bonding. Cool. What did you learn about bonding? Okay? So, well, I learned there were 3 bonds: covalent, covalent, polar covalent, and ionic. What makes it an ionic bond? What makes it a polar covalent bond? What makes it a covalent bond? Okay? So simple, even just definitions are fine. Just try and prove to me that you've learned and looked at that material a little bit. That's all I'm really trying for. So like I said, 2 to 3 sentences, 5 pages. I don't really care. Give me something that shows some proof of understanding. Okay? How do you know that you actually sent the email, that I actually got it? Particularly if I don't respond. Yeah, that was an initial hiccup when we first started doing this assignment. Okay, so what I've gone through and done is set up an auto response through Gmail. So if you send me an email with this subject line, and it must be this subject line, you will get an automatic response saying, thank you for participating, I've seen your email, you've got credit unless you hear another email from me. Cool. That just means I got it. If you do not get that response, that means one of 2 things. 1, I really didn't get it. Or 2, you didn't send the correct subject line. Right? If you take a look at the rules within the syllabus, it says I don't count that submission as a dialogue. That's not really true. Okay? Just trying to be mean and make people do it. Okay? Fix the subject line. Make sure it's consistently correct that this is the correct one, and you send that to me, everything will be good. If you give me a bad subject line, you won't get that auto response, And depending on my mood, I might send you another email saying, yes, you screwed up the subject line. I'm giving you credit. Fix it. Okay? So, kind of an important thing. So again, why go through all of this? So, well, that's for extra credit. It's actually an ulterior motive. What's the ulterior motive? Any guesses? Could go as far as learning. I'd say it's an even more diabolical motive than that.
Following direction.
No, I wouldn't even say that. That's pretty diabolical, though. Okay. If you go through and do this, you learn the material, you follow directions, which means also you do better in the class, which means do you need the extra credit? Probably not. Okay. Very diabolical. I give you extra credit to do something that means you don't need extra credit. Okay. It helps. Okay. One extra thing that I'll address with this is 100% strictly, without any questions, purely extra credit. If any teacher says, oh, I'm giving you an extra credit assignment, here's 10 points. They give you a 10-point assignment and then they grade on a curve. Was that extra credit? No. Okay. If you decide to not do that, you lost 10 points that everybody else got. Your score drops. This is strictly extra credit. How can I guarantee that it's strictly extra credit? At the end of the semester, I assign grades. I assign where my cutoffs are. Anybody within that 2, usually 3% margin, I then go back to my email and check to see how many submissions there were. If they were there, I do the bump. If not, you stay at the grade you were at. Okay? So it is 100% without any doubt extra credit. Okay? Will not impact your grade if you decide to not do it. Okay? Yes?
You get like 11 that you accepted and like 0.5% away.
I usually do a sliding scale on it. Yeah. And it also usually depends who submits. So if I look at the whole class and the most that was ever submitted was 9, if you get 8, I'll usually say the 9 is the 2% and the 8 I'll give 2% as well. Okay. If you forget to do it at the beginning of the semester and then decide after the first exam that you should be doing it, submit them. Okay. Don't worry about the timeline on it. If it really comes down to it and you happen to be on top of your game, submit every Monday and Wednesday. Okay. I hope I don't look that carefully. Probably won't. Okay. Where I will look is at the beginning of the semester, you send Monday and Wednesday just for the first 6 weeks. And at the end of the semester, I look back and say you only submitted it for the first 6 weeks. Then I won't give you the extra credit. Okay. The idea is to get you constantly thinking about the material throughout the entire semester. Okay. 1 or 2 weeks aren't going to be a big issue. Fun stuff, right? Questions? Okay. I remember where I'm at in this. Oh man, I didn't bring my handy sheet, so I don't have one. Attendance. Officially, there is a very strong correlation between attendance and performance in a class, retention. Okay? That strong correlation has then been turned into a causation argument by most schools that now insist that if you show up to, or if you are registered for a class, you must attend that class, otherwise you lose points. Okay? Just because grades go up with attendance, that does not mean that they are directly related to each other. If you show up to class and you sleep through it, great. You have now sat in class and you got those attendance points, but you have learned nothing throughout the entire semester. Okay? So the way that I look at it, mainly because I record all the lectures, is that what I want you to go through and do is show up to class ready for class. Be present in the classroom. Okay? Be willing to ask questions. Okay? Be willing to say, nope, you're going too fast, slow me down, speed me up, this is boring, move ahead. Okay? I want that extra feedback because that allows us to have this dialogue where we do better in the class overall. If you're just going to come to class because you think I want you to be, well, that's a bit mean. I do want you to be here, okay? I do assume you guys are nice people and you're not going to hurt my feelings when I'm standing up here and presenting. Okay? So I do want you to be here. But if you're coming in dehydrated, without any food, not enough sleep, and you're just going to sleep through the class or sit in the back and juggle, I don't know why you would juggle, but okay, that's just defeating the purpose of being here and being or having an attendance. Okay, so show up to class ready to go. If for some reason, okay, you have to miss, don't worry about it. Ideally, let me know, because there will be quizzes periodically throughout the semester, and I can just make it excused. Okay, I don't have any problems with that. Okay. Withdrawal policy. You are officially responsible for withdrawing. So if you want a W in the class as opposed to a failing grade, that is something you need to tell me. Otherwise, I might very well just give you a failing grade. So if you stop showing up to class, okay, you're going to lose all the points for class. At the end of the semester, I might go through and give you a W or an F, okay, because you were still officially enrolled in the class, even though you didn't attend. Okay, so if you want to withdraw from the class, you must notify me. Okay? Questions about that? I'll also try and stop you from withdrawing too. Okay? Get you the, and I don't mean it in like, no, you can't withdraw, but get you the help you need to get through the class. Okay? I've had several students that came up to me and said, I really need to withdraw, I'm just not understanding the material. We went back and looked at how they were studying and preparing, spun them around, they went from a failing student to a B. Okay? And the only reason they got a B was because they were failing at the beginning of the semester. Okay? So we can get you that help, but I need to know what's going on. Disabilities, the biggest one here is going to be learning disabilities. If you have some kind of learning disability, it's amazing how often chemistry brings it out, particularly my tests being extremely long. Okay? Everybody's going through the exact same time frame or having the same time limits as everybody else in the class. So even if it's long, it's still fair. Okay? If you have a learning disability, it is now not fair. Okay? You need to talk to the student services, and they have to go through, fill out a bunch of paperwork. You bring that paperwork to me. We can get you extra time if you need it, okay? Or a private room if you need it. Okay? But until I get that information, I can't do anything. Help, the tutoring center. Okay, please take advantage of the tutors. Laura is phenomenal as far as an organic tutor. She's definitely pointed out some things where I've made typos or mistakes, which is always fun. They do happen. So take advantage of both her help, my help while I'm there, and some of the other tutors. There are plenty of other tutors there that can help you with the material and get you going with it, at least get you to the point where you know where to find the answers. Okay? So please take advantage of that tutoring center. If for some reason you need a private tutor, I've got probably 1 or 2 names that I would of people that I would list as potential private tutors that you could go ahead and hire. As far as tutoring from me, because I've had students ask me for that, no, I cannot receive money from anybody, okay, for a class that I'm teaching. That is really not allowed for multiple reasons. Okay? That doesn't mean I won't give the help. If you say, I need an extra tutoring session Saturday 10 to 2, say, sure, we'll set that up, but I'll make it available to everybody. Say, okay, everybody, 10 to 2, I'm going to be at this coffee shop. We'll talk about chemistry. Okay? Civility in the classroom. You guys all seem to be very civil. I will ask questions periodically, as you've seen already. And usually I expect a response. The syllabus is so boring that I figure most of you aren't listening, so any question that I asked was just not going to be answered anyway. I do expect answers. I'm not a whole fan of the hand-raising thing. If it really comes down to it because you're all that excited about answering questions, then maybe I'll ask for the hand-raising thing, or maybe I'll say, wait, just one of you, to kind of get through it. And read through it. It's not that big of a deal. There's a section on plagiarism in there as well. For this class, it's not going to be that big of an issue because I don't think I've set up any writing assignments for this one. So we won't have to worry about plagiarism within the lecture. Lab will be a separate issue. Okay? Questions? Schedule's on that last page, right? No questions? None whatsoever?
Will the exam 2 looks like right after exam 1?
It is. And by right after, it's like 2 weeks. The material being covered on exam 2 is almost a specialized topic. Probably one of my favorite topics within organic chemistry. You're looking at structures and solving structures through different techniques. That material doesn't really mesh well with any other section. We'll keep coming back to it, but the first pass of learning it is going to be a full separate sequence of lectures, and it really doesn't take more than 3 or 4 seconds. So we'll go through and take advantage of that information in that short time span, and I hit you with that exam. And it seemed to me like that was going to be fast break. So these little short pieces of paper, any idea what they're for? Quizzes. Okay, so I want you to write your name on it, and then we'll go through and do the quiz. I'll give you 5 minutes for this quiz. It is a bit of a rough one, but it's to kind of prove a point. We'll talk about that point on Wednesday, if I can advance the slides. There it goes. 5 minutes. Pretty awesome. Hey, it's an individual quiz now, come on. Nice thought process.
Do you count?
I won't answer that. No pressure, 3 minutes left. If you finish it early, you can just hold it up. I'll come around and just tag it from you. So what do you think? What's the insidious intent behind question number 1? I wouldn't even go as far as that. So knowing people is a good ulterior motive, but I think there's an even worse one here. Okay. One of the most common things, oh, I totally understood what he said in class. I said everybody's name in this class. How many of you actually remembered 5 of those names? Full names. There we go. Okay. Just because I say it doesn't mean that you're going to remember it. Okay? It's going to require practice. Okay? As far as how it gets graded, this is a very lax graded quiz. Okay? So don't stress on that. Okay? So the idea is I want you to realize that just because you're hearing it in here doesn't mean it's going to stick. You're going to need to take some practice with it. The other nice kind of motive behind it is it's starting to get you to think about who else is in the classroom. Start talking to the people in here. They will help you with it. Okay? Subtle intent behind the dialogue, so that you don't need extra credit. That's what I would have said. Okay. 1 sentence or less, describe hybridization theory. Magic. Wouldn't go quite that bad, but we'll talk about that. So we got a little bit here just to race through some topics. Hopefully everything within these first 30 slides is reviewed. I know some of the syllabus stuff was new to you, but most of these next sequence of slides should be 100% review. So organic chemistry, one of the broad definitions is the study of carbon compounds. Doesn't work perfectly because there's a lot of people that would say carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, not organic. Diamond, not organic, but all of those contain carbon. Okay? So it's an odd definition to work with, but it's something we can deal with. So that brings up 2 other questions. What is carbon and what is a compound? Okay? Could you classify carbon for me? What could you tell me about carbon?
Forms 4 bonds.
Go with an element, go with atom, and go with 4 bonds. Really what I was going for there is something like an element or an atom. So we need to know what makes up an atom. Well, what's a compound?
Multiple atoms.
Multiple atoms that are somehow connected to each other. So we need to be able to see the linkages between how we can bring multiple atoms together and what makes those linkages. Okay? And then also what makes our atoms. So what makes up an atom?
Protons, neutrons, electrons.
Okay? We have protons, neutrons, and electrons. Where are your protons and neutrons? In our nucleus. Where are our electrons? Outside of it. Okay? So we've got some extra definitions with each of those. I'm not sure I've ever seen this written out in another textbook before. I like to define our protons as defining the element. Okay? You change the number of protons, you change the element, period. Okay? Neutrons. So the protons is the most sensical one. Then we move to neutrons. I say neutrons define the mass or the isotope. Is that strictly true? Okay. If we're looking at the mass, what elements or what subatomic particles make up the mass of an element? Protons and neutrons. But when we look at an individual element, I can't change the number of protons. So if I'm going to look at changing to the isotope, it's the neutrons that are going to determine it. So when I look at the neutrons, I'm saying, oh, those are going to be my isotopes. What happens with our electrons? The electrons are really going to define our charge. Is it only dependent on the electrons? Nope. It's dependent on the imbalance of protons and electrons. But again, once I've defined the element, I've defined the number of protons. The only thing I can go outside of now is the electrons. Okay? So it's just kind of how we shape and organize our thought processes within these concepts. Okay? So our protons and neutrons exist in the nucleus, right? Why do we put them in the nucleus? Oh, good question. I don't know. Okay? Why do we put our neutrons in the nucleus? So when we put our protons together, what happens? You get a positive next to a positive. The north end of a magnet with the north end of a magnet. And what happens? Repel away. So we need to add something in there to keep them stuck together. So that's what our neutrons are for. Okay? What happens when we move to our electrons? Do we have this extra particle to keep our electrons located in one spot? No. So our electrons are now going to start to go outside of that nucleus at differing energy levels, right? And we can look at those as both a distance and an energy. So if we start at our nucleus at the very bottom of that, what we're doing is starting to put electrons in at our lowest energy first. Why would we put them at our lowest energy?
Requires the least amount of energy to put them there.
Stability, lowest energy, all of these things are good concepts. Everything wants to be low in energy. Okay, if we look at a nice observable version of energy, we could look at potential or kinetic energy. If we look at potential energy, it's okay, I'm pushing the time limits. Potential energy, we could look at where we're standing on the ground. Our potential energy is relatively low. But what happens if you lift it up to 200 feet in the air? Your potential energy is now skyrocketed. Okay? Now think about your life, your existence. You're standing on the ground. Whoop, you're at 200 feet up and above in the air. Which one are you more comfortable at? On the ground. Electrons have very similar thought process, or if you want to say thought. Want to go to that lowest energy because it's our most stable, it's our happiest position to be. Right? And as much as I would love to continue going on with this, I'm sure the next class is going to chase me out of here, so I will have to go ahead and stop there. All right? Please go ahead and review the lecture slides. Probably read through the textbook, Chapter 1. This is all Chapter 1 material, and we'll pick up there on Wednesday.